Good morning, everyone. I am Giulia Alessandri, researcher at the Institute of Management of Scuola Superiore Sant'Anna, and today I'm going to talk to you about green practices and tourism industry. The WebLab is articulated in two parts. First part is an introduction to the main environmental impacts of the tourism sector. Second part is related to the presentation of examples of good environmental sustainability practices for tourism organization. Let's start with the introduction. Tourism has been defined by United Nations in 2010 as activities of people who travel to and stay in places outside their usual environment for no more than one consecutive year for leisure, business, and other purposes not related to the exercise of a remunerated activity within the place visited. For this reason, tourism is a really broad concept, since it is not only an economic activity, but involves the entire cultural, natural, and historical heritage. All these elements together are able to characterize a tourist destination in a unique way. In the tourism sector, there are many actors involved that define the tourism value chain. The tourism value chain can be defined as the set of activities primary and supporting, fundamental to the performance of the tourism sector. In other words, the stakeholders involved in the core and supporting activities of the tourism sector. Among the main players, there are transportation and accommodation providers, and of course, tourists. Supporting activities include policymakers' activity, the training needed to develop the personnel required to provide services within the sectors and infrastructures. As can be seen from the figure, tourism is therefore a complex system that involves many different figures. Let's now focus on the impacts of tourism. Interestingly, according to the article The Carbon Footprint of Global Tourism, published in the scientific journal Nature Climate Change, tourism is responsible for 8% of CO2 emissions of the global economy. The figure also shows the impact of the tourism subsectors on CO2 emissions relative to the year 2005. The accommodation sector, including lodging and overnight stays, is responsible for 21% of total CO2 emissions. Emissions from transportation, including aviation and automobiles, represent over 70% of the sector's total emissions. Tourism environmental impacts aren't limited to CO2 emissions. The tourism sector is also responsible for other environmental impacts, such as water and energy consumption, particularly during peak season or during peak tourist arrivals in certain locations, as well as waste generation and related activities. There are also physical impacts on local areas, such as those resulting from infrastructure and construction and its impact on the soil, and sociocultural impacts, such as the loss of cultural identity due to excessive commercialization and modification of local areas, places, and models for tourism. All these impacts have negative effects on natural habitats, including the reduction of space and sites. Conflicts may arise also due to the overuse of natural resources and the alteration of historical sites. The slides shows the impacts of the pandemic on the tourism sector. International arrivals for 2020 and 2021 are shown here. Compared to 2019, the year before the pandemic, all seasons recorded a positive balance in terms of international arrivals. 2020 and 2021, however, were significantly impacted by pandemic-related restrictions. Therefore, we must understand how to leverage the harsh lessons learned from the pandemic to support and renew the sector, making it more resilient to future shocks and to meet consumer demands for greener, more nature-focused options and, in general, higher quality alternatives in terms of sustainability. We can therefore consider greater consumer awareness and, generally speaking, consumers who are more focused on nature, hygiene, food quality, and the avoidance of overcrowding. In a period of intense competition, the quality of tourism offerings will be a crucial factor in recovery. Now we move on to the second part of the WebLab, where some examples of good practices adopted by companies operating in the tourism sector will be presented. We can start with examples of environmental practices aimed at improving the activities of tour operators and travel agencies. First of all, promoting the offering of sustainable tourism packages and services can be a good sustainability practices. For example, promote the reduction and mitigation of the environmental impact of transport operations, or develop and promote tourist packages and services that include a favorable option to the environment in the field of accommodation, services, and tourist activities. Green behaviors can also involve raising awareness among tourists, for example, by taking actions to promote the adoption of environmentally sustainable behaviors, making them true advocates of sustainability, for example, by making more informed choices when selecting transportation, considering visiting sites by walking or using public transportation. Regarding sustainable practices in the hospitality industry, please refer to the second WebLab, Catering, Restoration and Food Value Chain. For energy consumption, further analysis may be useful, but due to time constraints, this will not be covered here. Best practices in the tourism sector can also address water consumption. This is one of the most complex aspects to manage in the tourism sector, especially during the high season. Among the best practices that can be implemented, there is the periodic monitoring of water consumption, including swimming pool management. This monitoring covers both processes and high water consumption areas for the installation of individual meters. Other measures may include allowing guests to reuse linens for longer period rather than requiring a daily change. Promote the use of bulk water dispensers within facilities to reduce bottled water use and wash fruit and vegetables in special containers instead of under running water, significantly reducing water consumption. Finally, implement measures to reuse and recover water. Regarding water consumption, other practices that accommodation providers can implement can be suggested. For example, purchasing water-efficient appliances and investing in staff training. Even selecting environmentally certified suppliers, ensuring that accommodation providers also focus on those who care for their environmental performance. Efficient management of swimming pools and green areas, for example, using rainwater for irrigation, is also recommended. Let's now look at some best practices for waste reduction in hospitality facilities, like promoting waste sorting within guest rooms. For example, install recycling bins in common areas of accommodation facilities, but also encourage separate waste collection within individual rooms. Use reusable magnetic keys. Limit the use of disposal products such as single-use personal hygiene products. Promote the use of sales methods for food and beverages not consumed by guests, such as using Too Good To Go services or donating them to various charities. Let's now talk about energy management within accommodation facility. A good practice may be to install a centralized energy management system which regulates all heating, ventilation, and cooling devices in the facilities, automatically turning off air conditioning and lights in rooms when they are empty, thus achieving greater energy savings. Another interesting practice involves concentrating guests in certain areas of the hotel during low season to avoid power being supplied to unoccupied space. During colder periods, it can also be useful to occupy warmer and sunny area of the building, and vice versa during warmer periods, thus reducing energy consumption. If linens are washed at the hotel, we also recommend using the dryer only when strictly necessary. Other examples of good practices that can be adopted by accommodation facilities are promoting bicycle rental service to encourage sustainable transportation, using sustainable items, for example, made of recycled materials or certified paints that meet specific environmental standards, implementing reward mechanisms for particularly high-performing customers, including discounts, vouchers, or small prices, promoting the use of local products to reduce the impact of transportation and product operations, informing guests and customers of the practices adopted, promoting collaboration, and finally, carrying out volunteer work dedicated to the redevelopment of neighborhoods, cleaning streets, and maintaining green spaces. I would also like to take this opportunity to present 2 projects involving the Scuola Superiore Sant'Anna related to tourism and sustainability. The first, tourism, is founded by the European COSME program and aims to promote the adaptation of small and medium-sized tourism enterprises in Europe to adopt a more sustainable business model, reducing plastic use, facilitate access to initiative, promoting sustainable tourism, and meet consumer needs through a process of knowledge transfer, exchanges, and collaboration with other businesses, accelerator, business incubators, development agencies, and tourism sector stakeholders. In Circle, founded by the European MED program, promotes the application of a circular economy principle to the tourism sector of island and sparsely populated areas by testing a new methodology in 4 main areas of application: mobility, energy efficiency, water management, and waste management. The project aims to achieve long-lasting and easy adaptable results that can support policymakers with concrete tools and experimentation opportunities to improve sustainability assessment and planning capabilities in resource-scarce areas and to discover new financing opportunities to promote sustainable growth. Thank you for your attention and see you at the next Web Lab.